The stranger's horse collapsed right in front of Magnolia Whitehaven's general store, sending dust clouds swirling through the September heat. Before the rider could even dismount, 7-year-old Clementine Whitehaven burst through the screen door like a miniature tornado, her copper braids flying behind her. "Sir, sir, are you single?" she hollered at the top of her lungs, causing every head on Willowbrook's main street to turn. "Because my mama is the most beautiful woman in 3 counties, and she makes the best apple butter you ever did taste." The stranger, tall, weathered, with eyes the color of storm clouds, stared down at the pint-sized matchmaker with bewilderment. His horse wheezed, foam flecking its muzzle, clearly pushed to its limits. "Clementine Rose Whitehaven, you get yourself back here this instant." Magnolia's voice carried from inside the store, mortification evident in every syllable. But Clementine wasn't deterred. She'd been planning this moment for weeks, ever since Mrs. Cordelia Blackthorne mentioned that handsome drifters sometimes pass through their little Tennessee Valley town. "She's 26 and never been married because all the men around here are either too old, too young, or too stupid to see what's right in front of them," Clementine continued, circling the stranger's horse like a tiny auctioneer. "She can birth calves, mend anything with a needle, and she sings like an angel when she thinks nobody's listening." The man's lips twitched despite himself. "Well now, little miss, and she's lonely." Clementine's voice cracked with the weight of a child who'd seen too much. "She cries sometimes when she thinks I'm asleep, and she talks to Papa's picture like he can still hear her. But he's been dead 3 years now, and I think it's time she had someone new to take care of us." That stopped the stranger cold. His storm-gray eyes softened as they moved from the determined child to the doorway where Magnolia had finally appeared. Her face flushed crimson with embarrassment. Even in her simple calico dress with flower handprints on the apron, she was indeed beautiful, the kind of beauty that came from strength rather than softness, with intelligent hazel eyes and honey-colored hair that caught the afternoon light. "I am so sorry," Magnolia began, but her words died as she met the stranger's gaze. Something electric passed between them. Something that made Clementine's heart leap with hope. The stranger dismounted slowly, favoring his left leg. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat. "Name's Jasper Ravencroft, and I'd be much obliged if you could spare some water for my horse. She's carried me a long way." "Of course," Magnolia managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Clementine beamed triumphantly. "See? You're already being nice to each other. This is going to work perfectly." She turned to Jasper with the confidence of a seasoned negotiator. "Now, about your marital status, Clementine." But Magnolia was fighting a smile now, and Jasper Ravencroft was staring at her like she'd just solved every mystery in the world. The horse whinnied weakly, breaking the spell. "Let's get your Mare some water first," Magnolia said practically. "Then we can discuss my daughter's business proposition." Jasper's laugh was like distant thunder. "I'd like that very much, ma'am. Very much indeed." 3 days later, Jasper Ravencroft was still in Willowbrook, and the entire town was buzzing with speculation. His horse had developed a mysterious limp that seemed to improve only when he was near Magnolia's store, and he'd taken to helping her with heavy deliveries and repairs that her late husband Tobias used to handle. "It's working, isn't it?" Clementine whispered to her best friend, Cordelia Blackthorne's granddaughter Primrose, as they spied on the adults from behind the pickle barrels. "Look how he watches her when she's not looking." Primrose, wise beyond her 8 years, nodded sagely. "And see how she hums now? Mama says women only hum when they're thinking sweet thoughts about a man." Indeed, Magnolia was humming as she arranged bolts of fabric, seemingly unaware that Jasper was pretending to examine horseshoes while stealing glances at her graceful movements. The chemistry between them was palpable, crackling like lightning before a storm. "Mr. Ravencroft, Magnolia." said suddenly, causing him to nearly drop a horseshoe on his foot. "You've been most helpful these past few days, but surely you have somewhere you need to be? Someone waiting for you?" Jasper set down the horseshoe carefully. "No, ma'am. Nobody waiting anywhere." His voice carried a weight of old pain. "Been drifting for the better part of 2 years now, ever since. Well, since I lost everything I thought mattered." Clementine's ears perked up. This was exactly the kind of tragic backstory that made for the best love stories in her mama's romance novels. "I lost my farm up in Kentucky," Jasper continued, his eyes distant. "Drought, then locusts, then the bank. My wife, she couldn't handle the shame of it. Ran off with a traveling salesman, left me with nothing but debts and a broken heart." Magnolia's hand stilled on the fabric. "I'm sorry. That must have been terrible. Thought it was the end of the world at the time." Jasper's gaze found hers. "But now I'm thinking maybe it was just the beginning of something better. Sometimes a man has to lose everything to find what he was really looking for all along." The air between them shimmered with possibility. Clementine held her breath, sensing this was a crucial moment. "Mama," she piped up, abandoning all pretense of hiding, "why don't you invite Mr. Ravencroft for Sunday supper? You always make enough food for 6 people anyway." Magnolia's cheeks flushed. "Clementine, that's hardly—" "I'd be honored," Jasper interrupted, his eyes never leaving Magnolia's face. "If you'll have me, that is." "Well," Magnolia smoothed her apron nervously, "I suppose ... yes, that would be nice." Clementine pumped her fist in victory, while Primrose applauded softly from behind the pickle barrel. But their celebration was cut short by the sound of hoofbeats thundering down Main Street. 3 riders pulled up outside the store, their faces hard and their intentions unclear. The leader, a scarred man with cold blue eyes, dismounted with predatory grace. Well, he drawled, spitting tobacco juice into the dust. "If it ain't Jasper Ravencroft. Been looking all over creation for you, old friend." Jasper's entire demeanor changed, his body tensing like a coiled spring. "Silas Blackwater. Should have known you'd turn up eventually." Magnolia instinctively moved closer to Clementine, her maternal instincts screaming danger. Whatever this was about, it threatened the fragile happiness that had been blooming between them. "Got some unfinished business to discuss," Silas continued, his hand resting meaningfully on his gun. "Real private-like." Jasper's jaw tightened. "Then we'll discuss it, but not here. Not with ladies and children present." Clementine's heart sank. She'd finally found the perfect man for her mama. And now mysterious, dangerous men were going to ruin everything. The confrontation moved to the dusty street outside, but not before Jasper caught Magnolia's hand and squeezed it gently. "Whatever happens," he said quietly. "Know that these past 3 days have been the happiest I've had in years." Silas Blackwater and his men formed a loose circle around Jasper, their intentions unclear but ominous. Half the town had gathered to watch, including Sheriff Beauregard Thorne, who kept his hand near his weapon but seemed reluctant to intervene. "See, the thing is, Jasper," Silas drawled, "when you disappeared after that poker game in Louisville, you left some folks mighty unhappy. Seems there was some confusion about who owned what when the dust settled." "There was no confusion," Jasper replied steadily. "I won that money fair and square, and you know it. Your boss just couldn't accept that his luck had run out." Clementine pressed her face to the window, her heart pounding. She could see her mama's reflection in the glass, pale and frightened, and it made something fierce and protective rise in her chest. "Mama," she whispered, "Mr. Ravencroft's in trouble because of us, isn't he? Because he stayed here instead of keeping moving?" Magnolia's hand found her daughter's shoulder. "Sometimes good people have to face their past before they can have a future, sweetheart." Outside, The tension was escalating. "Thing is, Silas," continued, "Mr. Beaumont don't see it that way. He figures you cheated, and he wants his money back. With interest." "Tell Beaumont he can go to hell," Jasper said flatly. "I've got nothing left to give him, even if I owed him anything, which I don't. See, that's where you're wrong." Silas's smile was shark-like. "Seems you found yourself something worth protecting. Pretty little widow, sweet child. Be a shame. If anything happened to them because of your stubborn pride." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Jasper's hands clenched into fists, but he was outnumbered 3-1, and these men wouldn't hesitate to hurt innocents. That's when Sheriff Thorne finally stepped forward. "Now hold on there, Blackwater. I don't know what business you boys have with Ravencroft, but you're in my town now, and we don't take kindly to threats against our womenfolk." "This ain't your concern, Sheriff," Silas warned. "Everything that happens in Willowbrook is my concern." Thorne's voice carried the authority of a man who'd kept the peace for 20 years. "And I suggest you and your boys mount up and ride on before this gets unpleasant." Silas looked around at the gathering crowd, noting the hostile faces and the way several men had positioned themselves strategically. Small towns might seem easy prey, but they protected their own with fierce loyalty. "This ain't over, Ravencroft," he said finally. "Beaumont's got a long memory and longer reach than you might think." As the three riders galloped away, Jasper sagged with relief, but Magnolia could see the defeat in his shoulders. He was already preparing to leave, to protect them from the danger his presence brought. She burst through the door before he could. "Disappear. Don't you dare," she said fiercely. "Don't you dare run away just when things were getting interesting. Magnolia, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You think because you have enemies, you're not worthy of happiness. Well, let me tell you something. Jasper Ravencroft, we all have pasts we're running from. The question is whether you're brave enough to stop running and fight for something better." Clementine appeared at her mother's side, chin raised defiantly. "Besides, we're not scared of some mean old man, are we, Mama?" Looking down at her daughter's determined face and then up into Jasper's storm-gray eyes, Magnolia felt something she hadn't experienced since Tobias died, the fierce joy of having something worth fighting for. "No, sweetheart," she said firmly. "We're definitely not scared." Sunday supper at the Whitehaven cottage became a declaration of war against fear itself. Magnolia had invited half the town, transforming what should have been an intimate dinner into a community feast that sent a clear message. Jasper Ravencroft was under their protection now. The dining table groaned under the weight of fried chicken, cornbread, green beans with ham, and 3 different kinds of pie. Clementine had insisted on using her grandmother's best china, the pieces that only came out for Christmas and weddings. "This is better than Christmas," she announced to anyone who would listen, "because Santa never brought Mama a husband, no matter how many times I asked." Jasper sat between Magnolia and old Mrs. Cordelia Blackthorne, trying to process how his life had changed so dramatically in less than a week. The woman beside him smelled like lavender and sunshine, her laughter like music every time Clementine said something outrageous. Across the table, Sheriff Thorne regaled everyone with stories of his courting days, while the other men discussed everything from crop rotation to the latest improvements in farm equipment. "You know," whispered Mrs. Blackthorne, leaning close to Jasper, "I haven't seen Magnolia this happy since before Tobias took sick. That child of hers has been worried sick about her mama, though she tries not to show it." Jasper watched as Magnolia served pie, her movements graceful and confident. "She's remarkable," he said quietly. "I just wish my presence didn't put them in danger." "Son," Mrs. Blackthorne's voice was sharp with wisdom, "danger finds its way to folks whether they're looking for it or not. The question is whether you'll face it alone or with people who care about you." As if summoned by his thoughts, Clementine appeared at his elbow. Mr. Ravencroft, would you like to see Papa's workshop? Mama never goes in there anymore, but I know where she keeps the key. Magnolia looked up from her serving, catching the exchange. Something passed across her face, a flicker of old pain mixed with new possibility. It's all right, she said. Softly. I think Tobias would have liked you to see it. The workshop behind the house was a monument to interrupted dreams. Half-finished furniture projects set covered in dust sheets, tools hanging precisely where their owner had left them 3 years ago. Clementine lit an oil lamp, casting dancing shadows across workbenches and lumber stacks. Papa was making me a dollhouse when he got sick, she said matter-of-factly. See? He'd finished 3 rooms and was starting on the little staircase. Mama won't let anybody move his things, but I think he'd want someone to finish what he started. Jasper ran his fingers along the delicate woodwork, recognizing the skill and love that had gone into every joint and surface. He was a fine craftsman. Mama says I have his hands. Clementine held up her small fingers for inspection. But she won't teach me to use the tools because she says they're too dangerous. I think she just doesn't want to come in here because it makes her sad. What makes her sad? Magnolia's voice came from the doorway, soft but curious. Jasper turned to find her silhouetted against the evening light, beautiful and vulnerable. I was just admiring Tobias's work, he said carefully. Clementine mentioned he was building her a dollhouse. Magnolia stepped into the workshop for the first time since her husband's death. Her breath catching as memories flooded back. He loved working with his hands. Said wood talked to him, told him what it wanted to become. The dollhouse is beautiful, Jasper said gently. Would you mind if I finished it for her? I'd be honored to complete what he started. Tears gathered in Magnolia's eyes, but they weren't sad tears. They were the tears of a woman learning to let go of grief and embrace new love. I think he'd like that very much. Clementine beamed, sensing victory. See, you're perfect for each other. Papa would approve, and that's what matters most. As the 3 of them stood in the workshop surrounded by dreams and memories, none of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows beyond the window. Silas Blackwater had returned, and this time he wasn't planning to leave empty-handed. The attack came at dawn, swift and merciless. Clementine woke to the sound of breaking glass and her mother's terrified scream. 3 men had surrounded their cottage, led by Silas Blackwater, who kicked in the front door like he owned the place. Where is he? Silas demanded, grabbing Magnolia by the arm hard enough to leave bruises. Where's your boyfriend hiding? He's not here, Magnolia said through gritted teeth, trying to shield Clementine behind her. And even if he was, I wouldn't tell you. Mama! Clementine's voice was high and scared, but she wasn't crying. Instead, she was clutching something behind her back, her papa's old hunting knife that she'd hidden under her mattress months ago. Just in case, Silas backhanded Magnolia across the face, sending her stumbling. Don't play games with me, woman. Ravencroft's been sniffing around here like a dog in heat. He'll come running when he hears you're in trouble. That's exactly what Jasper did. He'd been sleeping in the church bell tower, unwilling to bring danger to the Whitehaven home. But the sound of Magnolia's scream carried across the valley like a battle cry. He arrived to find the cottage surrounded, his worst fears realized. Let them go, Silas, he shouted from the yard. Your quarrel is with me. Finally, Silas dragged Magnolia to the window, his gun pressed to her temple. Thought you might have developed some backbone since Louisville. Come on in, hands where I can see them. Jasper walked slowly toward the house, his mind racing through possibilities. He was outnumbered and outgunned, but he'd be damned if he'd let anything happen to the woman and child who'd given him reason to live again. That's far enough, Silas called out when Jasper reached the porch steps. Now, where? Going to have us a little chat about that money you stole." "I didn't steal anything," Jasper replied steadily. "But if Beaumont wants his poker losses back so badly, I'll work to pay him every cent. Just let the woman and child go." "Oh, we're way past that now," Silas laughed coldly. "See, you embarrassed Mr. Beaumont something fierce when you disappeared. Made him look weak. Can't have that in our line of business." Inside the house, Clementine was measuring distances with the calculating mind of a child who'd grown up hunting rabbits with her papa. The man holding her mama was focused on Jasper, his attention divided. If she could just— "You know what I think?" Silas continued, pressing the gun harder against Magnolia's head. "I think Mr. Beaumont would be real pleased if I brought him your woman as a little bonus. Pretty thing like her would fetch a good price in New Orleans." That was the moment. Everything changed. Clementine moved like lightning, driving her papa's knife deep into Silas's thigh while simultaneously biting down on his gun hand. Magnolia broke free just as Sheriff Thorne and half the town militia burst through the back door. Having been alerted by Mrs. Blackthorne, who'd heard the commotion from her nearby farm dock, the gunfight was brief but fierce. When the smoke cleared, Silas Blackwater was dead, one of his men was wounded and captured, and the third had escaped on horseback. Most importantly, the Whitehaven family was safe. "My God, Clementine," Jasper breathed, sweeping the little girl into his arms. "You're the bravest person I've ever met." "I told you we weren't scared," she said proudly, then burst into tears of relief. Magnolia wrapped her arms around both of them, her heart overflowing with gratitude and love. "I think," she said shakily, "it's time we stopped pretending this is anything less than what it is." "And what is it?" Jasper asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Love," she said simply. "The real, lasting, worth fighting for kind." Sheriff Thorne cleared his throat. "Hate to interrupt this tender moment, but we've got some cleanup to do. And Jasper, I think you'd better send word to this Beaumont character that his debt-collecting days in Tennessee are over." As the sun rose over Willowbrook, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Clementine looked up at her mama and the man who was already becoming her new papa in all the ways that mattered. "So," she said with satisfaction, "when's the wedding?" The wedding preparations began immediately because in a small town like Willowbrook, true love was a community celebration. Mrs. Cordelia Blackthorne appointed herself chief coordinator, directing activities with the precision of a military general. 3 weeks, she announced to the gathered ladies of the sewing circle. That's enough time to make a proper dress, bake a decent cake, and get the church ready. Any longer and folks will start thinking there's something unseemly about the whole affair. Magnolia protested weakly that 3 weeks wasn't nearly enough time, but she was overruled by her own daughter, who had already designed the entire ceremony in her head, complete with flower arrangements and seating charts. "Mama, you've been lonely for 3 whole years, Clementine argued logically. "That's long enough. Besides, Mr. Ravencroft, Papa Jasper needs to belong somewhere proper before any more bad men come looking for him." Jasper, meanwhile, found himself swept into the masculine equivalent of wedding planning. The men of Willowbrook had decided he needed a proper bachelor party, which in their terms meant helping him finish Tobias's dollhouse, building furniture for the cottage, and consuming vast quantities of homemade whiskey while offering contradictory advice about marriage. "The secret," Sheriff Thorne proclaimed, slightly drunk, "is to always let her think she's won the argument, even when you're right." "That's terrible advice," contradicted old Ezekiel Barnes, the blacksmith. "The secret is honesty. Tell her everything, even when it hurts." "You're both wrong," declared young Pastor Micah Sweetwater, who'd been married exactly 6 months. "The secret is to remember that you're on the same team, fighting the world together." Jasper listened to all of it while putting the finishing touches on Clementine's dollhouse, his hands steady despite the whiskey. The truth was, he didn't need advice about loving Magnolia. That part came as naturally as breathing. What he needed was assurance that he deserved this happiness, that his past wouldn't continue to threaten their future. As if reading his thoughts, Sheriff Thorne approached with serious eyes. "Got word back from my contacts in Louisville," he said quietly. "Seems this Beaumont character met with an unfortunate accident. Horse threw him, broke his neck. His organization scattered to the winds, fighting over scraps. You're free and clear, son." Relief flooded through Jasper like a spring thaw. "Thank you, Sheriff, for everything. Just promise me one thing." Thorne gripped his shoulder firmly. "Promise me you'll make that woman happy. She's been through enough heartache for 10 lifetimes. "I promise," Jasper said solemnly. "I'll spend the rest of my life making sure she knows how precious she is." The wedding dress was a community effort, created from Magnolia's grandmother's silk that had been carefully preserved in a cedar chest, combined with lace donated by 3 different households and buttons carved from pearl by the town's retired jeweler. When Magnolia put it on for the first fitting, even cynical Mrs. Blackthorne wiped away tears. "Child, you look like an angel," she breathed. "That man of yours won't know what hit him." Clementine, who was to be the flower girl and maid of honor, combined, practiced her walk down the aisle with serious concentration. She'd chosen wildflowers over expensive roses, declaring that her mama deserved something that grew naturally in their valley rather than something fancy from far away. Besides, she explained to anyone who would listen, Papa Jasper fell in love with Mama just as she was, not all dressed up fancy. The flowers should be real too. 2 days before the wedding, Jasper presented Clementine with a completed dollhouse. It was a masterpiece, a perfect replica of their cottage, complete with tiny furniture, miniature windows that opened and closed, and a little family of wooden dolls he'd carved himself. "It's perfect," she breathed, then looked up at him with eyes wise beyond her years. "Thank you for finishing what Papa Tobias started, and thank you for starting what he couldn't finish." "What's that?" Jasper asked, though he suspected he knew. "Making Mama happy again," she said simply, "and being my new papa, the choosing kind, not just the blood kind." That night, as Jasper walked Magnolia home from the final wedding rehearsal, she stopped suddenly in the moonlight and turned to face him. "Are you sure?" she asked quietly. "About all of this? About us? Because once we're married, there's no going back to being strangers who just happened to meet." Jasper cupped her face gently in his hands. "Magnolia Whitehaven, I've been waiting my whole life for you without even knowing it. I'm more sure of this than I've ever been of anything. Even more sure than that poker hand in Louisville," she teased. "Especially more sure than that," he laughed, pulling her close. "That was just luck. This is destiny." As they kissed under the stars, neither of them noticed the small figure watching from the cottage window, where Clementine was putting her wooden doll family to bed in their perfect little house, whispering prayers of gratitude for answered wishes and new beginnings. The wedding of Magnolia Whitehaven and Jasper Ravencroft became the stuff of Willowbrook legend. The entire town turned out, along with folks from neighboring valleys who'd heard about the romance that began with the 7-year-olds. Bold proposition. The church overflowed with wildflowers, laughter, and the kind of joy that comes from witnessing true love triumph over adversity. Clementine walked down the aisle with the dignity of a queen, scattering petals and beaming at every face in the congregation. When she reached the altar, she turned to the gathered crowd and announced, "I told you she was perfect for him." The laughter that followed was warm and loving, setting the tone for a ceremony that celebrated not just the union of 2 hearts, but the creation of a family forged by choice rather than chance. Pastor Sweetwater had prepared a traditional service, But when the moment came for vows, both bride and groom had words of their own to share. "Jasper," Magnolia said, her voice clear and strong, "you came to us a stranger, broken and lost. But you saw in our little family something worth protecting, something worth fighting for. Today I promise to be your safe harbor, your home, and your partner in whatever adventures life brings us." Jasper's voice was thick with emotion when he replied, "Magnolia, you and Clementine taught me that sometimes the best things in life come from unexpected places. You gave me hope when I thought I'd lost everything, and love when I thought I was unworthy of it. I promise to honor the memory of Tobias by being the husband and father you both deserve, and to love you both with everything I have for all the days of my life." When Pastor Sweetwater pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was tender and full of promise. But it was Clementine's whoop of joy that really sealed the moment, followed by her declaration, "Now we're a real family." The reception was held in the town square, with tables groaning under the weight of every family's best dish. Music flowed from fiddles and harmonicas as couples danced under strings of paper lanterns. Jasper and Magnolia moved together as if they'd been partners for years, while Clementine flitted between groups of adults, accepting congratulations on her successful matchmaking with the pride of a job well done as the evening wound down and the newlyweds prepared to leave for their honeymoon. A week at a cabin by the mountain lake, Clementine pulled Jasper aside for a private conversation. "Papa Jasper," she said seriously, "I need to tell you something important." "What's that, sweetheart?" "I prayed for you every night for 2 whole years," she confessed. "I asked God to send Mama someone who would love her the way she deserved and who wouldn't mind having a daughter who asks too many questions and sometimes gets into trouble." Jasper knelt down to her level. "And what do you think? Did God answer your prayer?" Clementine studied his face with the intensity of a child who'd learned early to read people's hearts. "I think maybe God was just waiting for the right time. And maybe you needed to lose everything first so you'd know how special we are when you found us. You know what, Clementine? I think you might be the wisest person in this whole town." "I know," she said matter-of-factly, then threw her arms around his neck. "I love you, Papa Jasper. Thanks for marrying my mama and making us a family." 5 years later, the Ravencroft family had grown to include twin boys Tobias and Samuel, and a general store that had become the heart of Willowbrook's social life. Jasper had proven to be not just a loving husband and father, but a natural businessman with ideas for expanding their operation. The dollhouse still sat in Clementine's room, though at 12 she claimed to be too old for such things. But sometimes, when her little brothers were napping and the house was quiet, she could be found rearranging the tiny furniture and whispering stories to the wooden family inside. On their 5th wedding anniversary, as Magnolia and Jasper sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard, she turned to her husband with a smile that still took his breath away. "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if Clementine hadn't been so bold that day?" Jasper pulled her closer, marveling as he did every day at his incredible good fortune. "I try not to think about it too much. It scares me to imagine a world where I rode past your store without stopping." "Well," Magnolia said, settling contentfully against his shoulder, "I suppose we have our daughter to thank for knowing exactly what we needed before we did." Sir, are you married?" came a high voice from the yard, where 4-year-old Tobias was interrogating a traveling tinker about his marital status. "Because my teacher, Miss Primrose, is very pretty and makes excellent cookies." Clementine looked up from her book with horror. "Toby, no. You can't just ask people things like that." But Jasper and Magnolia were laughing, remembering another little girl who'd had the courage to ask a stranger the most important question in the world. Some things, it seemed, ran in the family dot as the sun set over Willowbrook Valley, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. The Ravencroft family settled into another evening of the contentment that comes from love freely given and gratefully received. And if sometimes their neighbors heard laughter drifting from the cottage windows late into the night, well, that was just the sound of a family that had found its way home.